We record these in case people want to watch them from home. So that's what Carrie is doing over there. But we will go ahead and kind of kick things off, but we're also going to, because it's a nice small group, I'll come and sit down when it comes to Q&A time. But I want to run through a couple things, and some of you have maybe heard this before, and I saw all of you got these pieces of information. And some of this you'll see here. If you have questions as we're going through these, go ahead and let me know, and we'll pause and take a look at it too, or you can jot them down and we can come back to them. But as you all know, we have a referendum vote coming up this fall. And we always lead by talking about our vision statement and mission statement and our commitment to equity. And our vision and mission statements are tied to opportunities, achievement, and community for all. And there's really 4 parts to that. There's the opportunities, achievement, and community, which are all really important for us. But there's also the for all, which means we want everyone to be involved in these different things. And you can see that in our mission, in our vision statement, same thing in our mission statement. And our commitment to equity really reinforces that all. It's about ensuring that everyone has what they need, being intentional about creating an environment that doesn't have barriers, or we eliminate or reduce barriers for students, and so that all individuals, or every student, is empowered to explore and recognize the strengths in themselves and others. And I think that's a powerful statement for us. It reminds us that students that struggle need academically or behaviorally need more support, and we have a responsibility to provide that support for them, not just to be good at what we do for the students that it's easy to do that with. So when we talk about our referendum, it's really geared around, and you can see it in the documents there, it's geared around being able to maintain the things that we do, and we feel like we do the things that we do really well. We offer a high quality education. We are a destination school district in our area for families and for students. And I won't go, you can read these. A lot of these are also listed on that 2-page document that you have. But our school board and our admin team work really hard to make sure that we have that high quality education and opportunities for students, but also while being fiscally responsible. And I kind of look at that as a scale, and maybe this doesn't look like a scale to you, but that's what I'm picturing in my head. We want to be able to offer high quality programs and opportunities, academic and extracurricular opportunities for students, but we also have to live within our means. So we balance those 2 things. And we're a low revenue school district, so we don't have the resources that other districts have. I think, and I might be a little bit biased, but I think that there's plenty of evidence to this. I think that we do those 2 things really, really well. For the resources that we have as a district, I think we do an incredible job of providing high quality education opportunities for kids. And it's because of the awesome staff that we have at every one of our schools. We have teachers, support staff, administrators who do an incredible job. This bullet point, oh, I forgot that if I touch that, I'm not used to. All right, there we are. This bullet point talks about the fiscally responsible piece, and you can see from 2019-20 until this current year that tax rate or mill rate has dropped considerably. And that there's a graph on the backside of this that shows that history. And we'll kind of circle back to that if anybody has more questions on it. But this is kind of reinforcing that we do that balance very well. The one thing that I like to point out that's also in that document is every year we do a satisfaction survey with our staff, our parents, and our community members. And this past spring, we ask a question, is your family proud to be Redhawks? And we think that that's a really important question. We want our parents to feel good about being Milton Redhawks. And this past spring, 88% of our families agreed with that statement, that they're proud to be Redhawks. But what I like to point out is that only 4% disagreed. And these days, it's almost impossible to do anything that only 4% of the people would disagree with. So we're really proud that we've created a system and been able to live in a system where families are proud to be Red Hawks, but also when we ask that same question of community members who, many of whom don't have kids in the schools, or they may have had kids that went through our system but don't anymore, 77% of all community members agreed that their family is proud to be Red Hawks, and again, only 10% disagreeing is something that helps us see that we are doing some things that are benefiting not just our students and families, but also benefiting our community. And there's a short video that I'm going to show that kind of talks about the why, because a question we get often is, well, why is the district going to a referendum? Why are we bringing that to the voters? And we talk about the why, and then we talk about the what. What are the specifics of it? So I'm going to hit this and let you listen.
Our school district has a long history of providing opportunities for all community members, from our youngest students to adults. We believe strong schools lead to strong communities. We are proud of our district. And as we look toward the future, we know there is continued work to be done to ensure that all students have excellent opportunities in education.
On November 5th, voters in Milton will have the opportunity to vote on a single question referendum. State funding has not kept up with inflation since 2009. We are projecting significant budget deficits once our current referendum expires after the 2025-2026 school year. Non-recurring referendums are designed to address temporary needs. We are asking for a recurring referendum to address a growing state funding gap that has only grown wider over the last 15 years. If the referendum passes, we can maintain our high-quality programming and provide stability to our students, families, and community going forward. We can keep what is in place for our current and future Red Hawks. If the referendum passes, the average tax impact on every $100,000 in property value would be $3.50 a month for the first year, and is projected to decline in subsequent years. Without more funding, we can't maintain the programs that we have. Significant budget deficits will result in significant reductions to our programming. With those limitations, one of the greatest differences will be larger class sizes and fewer opportunities for students.
This investment in our schools is an investment in our students and our community. Please learn all you can about the upcoming referendum, and be sure to vote on or before November 5th.
And that video, or something like that video, is being shown in...
Our school district
don't
has a...
do that to me. All right. That video, or other districts' version of that video, is being shown in districts across the state, because it's amazing how many school districts are needing to go to local referendums just to be able to continue to do the things that they've been doing. Hello, welcome. You can grab those and find a seat anywhere here. In the video, it talked about the state's funding not keeping up with inflation over the years, and that's a key part of the why so many districts are needing to go to referendum. Prior to 2009, funding for schools from the state was tied to inflation. So and this bar in this graph, this bar is inflationary costs over that time from 2008 until now. The blue is state funding for schools during that time. So when it was tied to inflation, every district knew that if your costs were going to go up, you would get enough funding from the state to be able to maintain that. When it was decoupled from inflation, those inflationary costs have continued to increase. State funding has stayed really steady for a long time, and you can see what impact that has. And then it increased a little bit over the last few years, but right now that difference is about $3,300 per pupil, which for us with our enrollment equates to about $11 million below the revenue that we would have if this system that was in place continues. So the impact that that has had, again, isn't just on us, it's on school districts across the state, because everyone is dealing with that lack of funding from the state. We utilize other schools, and you can see the names of the school districts on the bottom here, other school districts in the Badger Conference, because that's our sports conference that we're in, and some of them are nearby us, some of them are, all of them are in south central Wisconsin, going up to a little bit north of Madison, but they're all districts that are about our same size, and this looks at what revenue each of those different districts had. So the blue bar is the maximum revenue per member. The orange is the average of all of these districts, this line, that's that 12,560. And the gray line is what's called the low revenue ceiling. And you can see districts are above that low revenue ceiling. We're above it in large part because we have a $2.5 million non-recurring referendum that's going to be expiring in 2 years. When that expires, we're going to move from below average in this group to down either the bottom or near in the bottom 2 or 3 districts for sure. So you can see that system that the state has put in place for funding, and that gap has really created a system where some districts have a lot of revenue. And if you have revenue, you can do more things for kids. You can offer more programs, you can have smaller class sizes, you can have more support for students that struggle, and other districts have considerably less. It really has created a system of haves and have-not school districts. If districts are able to have additional revenue from local voters, local taxpayers, they're going to have more revenue to work with. So the fiscal challenge has been trying to find a balance for our school budgets. And when you have a deficit looming, which we have, there's 2 ways to address it. You can either find additional revenue, and really the only way for us to have additional revenue is to ask the voters for additional revenue, or you can make budget and spending reductions. I talked earlier about a lot of districts, 137 school referendum questions across the state will be on the November ballot. So we're one of 137 that are doing that. If we include this past April, because school districts can bring these to the voters in April elections and in November elections, over 200 school districts across the state, so almost half of the total school districts in the state, have brought or are bringing a referendum question to their voters in 2024. And a common question that we get, and we can speak more to this when we finish up the slides, is what would happen if it didn't pass? What reductions would you need to make? And 75 or about 75% of our budget is for people, for salaries and benefits. And that's typical in school districts. Schools are very much people-centered. It's all of our different employee groups, our teachers, our support staff, our building and grounds team, our school nutrition team, bus drivers, administrators are all in that 75%. But if we have to reduce our spending by $5 million, which is what we project our deficit would be, we would need to consider all of the different things that are listed here. And all of these things are listed because they're things that other districts who are maybe a year in front of us on this, who already had to go through significant budget reductions, have had to do or have had to consider. And again, I won't go through all of these, but the biggest impact that this would have is we would have to let go some teachers. And there's no way that we can get to $5 million in reductions without doing that. And reducing our number of teachers means increasing class sizes. It means offering fewer programs, either reducing or eliminating different programs, and having fewer curricular and extracurricular activities. And I'm going to pause for a second and ask Sarah, I'm not going to pause for a second. I'll come back to that. We'll go through the rest of this, but I'm going to have Sarah speak to what she sees as the impact of having fewer people would have on our students. And then we'll circle back to like reductions in benefits and wage freezes too, and the impact that those things have. This graph is also on your handout, and this is kind of getting to the what the school board is asking for. This year and next year, we still have that $2.5 million non-recurring referendum, but that ends here. That ends after next year, and that's why we have a balanced budget for this year. We anticipate a slight deficit next year, but where the rubber hits the road for us is going to be that 26-27 year when this $2.5 million goes away, and we continue this falling further and further behind the state. So although it's an ask for $5 million, it has a net impact of $2.5 million because this is gone and it's bumping it up by another $2.5 million to get at that total of $5 million. And I touched the screen again. The other thing while we're on this slide that I want to hit on, a recurring referendum means that it comes into place the first year and it gives the board the authority to levy up to that amount. The board doesn't have to levy that full amount, but then once you're done with that first year, then that becomes part of your base. And if you remember that slide that had all the different districts on it, a big part of the reason why some had bars that were this high and others had bars that were this high is because they've in the past approved recurring referendums, and then that stays in their base. One question that I got, that someone misunderstood a $5 million recurring, and they thought that meant $5 million would be added the first year, and then that would stay in place and another $5 million, and that you'd keep adding another $5 million each year, and it would just, and I could understand their concern if that was the case, because that would have a significant impact on people's taxes. And then I think this is the last slide, and you also have this graph in the handouts. But when we talk about being fiscally responsible, about balancing providing great education with being fiscally responsible, we know that some people value this more than this, but we also know that other people value this. And we don't try to change people's minds or say you should value one or the other more, because everyone's situation is different. What we've tried to do as a district is balance those two things as best we can. Being a low revenue district, how can we provide a great education for students? And we've been able to do that really, really well, but we aren't going to be able to continue to be able to do these things if we lose that $2.5 million in revenue and we continue to fall further behind inflation. So on this is our tax rate, and it goes back to 14-15, so it goes back about 10 years. The blue is our history, so you can see we were like between $8 and $9 much of the time, and on your handout it has the actual numbers written in for each of these, but that average over those 10 years was $8.44 for the tax rate. You can see that this year we're well below that, and we've been on a downward trend. We've been fiscally responsible. We have projections for the next few years, and our projection for what impact the referendum has, this is the first year that if the referendum is approved, that it would kick in, and you can see that increase of 42 cents. And an increase of 42 cents on the mill rate equates to $42 for every $100,000 in property value. On your small postcard-sized handout, if you flip it to what I would call the back side of that, it shows that $42 for every $100,000 in property value equates to, if you think of a $250,000 home, that would be $105 increase for that year. So for $100,000, $42 is about $3.50 a month. So we feel that that's a reasonable ask, but we also understand that for some people, the definition of reasonable is different. We have folks that are on fixed incomes, folks that are struggling financially, and we understand that. The other thing I want to point out on this before we just sit down and talk about any questions or thoughts that you all have is that our projection would be a 1-year bump, but then getting back into that trend of decreasing. And these are projections. We don't know for sure what those numbers are going to be, but what we know they aren't going to be is up where it used to be. I mean, these numbers for this year and the next 3 or 4 years are the lowest tax rates that our district has had in over 20 years. And I think that's the last of that. So I'm going to slide over and just sit and see what questions or thoughts anybody has. Or we could let Principal Stuckey share what I paused her on before, because a question that we always get, are you going to hook her up with a microphone? All right. All right. A question that we always get is,
turn it on.
what happens if it doesn't pass? Because we talked about if it does pass, we're not adding shiny new things, we're keeping what's in place right now. But Sarah, if it doesn't pass and we need to make $4 or $5 million in reductions, what does that mean for students here at Harmony or in other schools?
So one of the points that Rich made was that we've been fiscally responsible all along, and in that we have adjusted the amount of sections that we offer for students based on the enrollment. So this current year, we reduced a section of kindergarten and second grade at Harmony because of a smaller enrollment than past years. And the difference that made is we now have 23 children in 2 kindergarten rooms and 25 in each of our second grade rooms, which a typical might be around 21 in other schools in the district that didn't have to reduce a section. So that impact, no matter whether that was because Milton West also reduced to third grade, and so they have 25 in third grade. So if the referendum doesn't pass and we have to further reduce sections by reducing the amount of staff that we have, then those class sizes would just continue to increase. And so the district would have to make decisions on which schools that would impact, and then students may have to move schools to be able to accommodate the needs there, and then the high class sizes. So, and some districts have like instructional aides for every kindergarten classroom. Milton does not have that, and so these are very high class sizes without additional supports for those little Red Hawks in those classrooms. And so that would be the biggest concern, because the time that the teacher has for each child would be reduced when there's more children in the room. And so the impact would certainly impact their social emotional development and their opportunities for learning help. And I think that would be something in the K-3 world that would be a big challenge.
And I think that Sarah hit the nail on the head around what that level of reductions would look like at our K-3 schools. And it's kind of the same at Northside too. We currently have 29 students in a couple of our 6th grade sections at Northside. And there's no way around that our elementary class sizes would grow by maybe a handful of kids in each classroom. And when you're already big and you add another handful of kids, you're not in a good atmosphere for students for learning. At the high school level, it would mean reducing like AP classes, advanced placement classes. One of the things that we do really well is we offer a wide variety of courses for students. If some students are interested in the arts or music or math and science or our technology and what traditionally has been kind of tech ed or shop classes that now are kind of tech ed classes. We do those things really well, and a lot of students thrive in those situations and move right from high school into the local workforce in those areas. So those are some of the things that would need to be reduced. In other districts, they've eliminated middle school music because of having to make budget cuts. Evansville is a good example, or middle school athletics, which makes it hard to have the strong music and athletic programs, which are very important learning opportunities for a lot of students. So the one other thing on that topic that I said I was going to circle back to are wage freezes. Another thing that Evansville did was they put in a wage freeze in addition to cutting a whole bunch of people. And when you put a wage freeze in, it creates a lot of uncertainty for staff members. And if people have that uncertainty, they're going to look to take a job in a district that has more certainty. So being able to stay competitive with salaries and benefits is important for us to have, to keep and to hire the people that allow us to do those great educational things that I talked about earlier.
Could I jump in on a point about open enrollment? We have in Wisconsin, as you may or may not know, we're an open enrollment state. So families can, if you are a resident in Janesville, but you choose to have your children attend in Milton, you can fill out paperwork and apply to open enroll them into Milton. And so when Rich was going through the examples of all of the opportunities that we provide at the high school type of thing, there are people who choose Milton because of these opportunities. And so I think if a referendum passes and we're able to just maintain these great opportunities we have for our students, that helps us to be a competitive district, not just for staff, which Rich spoke to, but for students who are choosing and families who are choosing Milton because of our great staff and our great programs. If a referendum does not pass and we have to make adjustments to the level of staff and to those programs, I would predict that we would lose some of that ability to stay competitive with other area districts, which then just kind of exaggerates the problem because we could have an enrollment drop, which then further impacts funding. And so I think those pieces are a factor too.
So can folks go around and share? You don't have to share your name if you're not comfortable doing that, and we are recording this and it's going to be available for anybody to watch, but if you're comfortable either sharing your name or if you have students here or in other places in the district, if you'd like.
I'll go first. I'm Becky. I have a daughter here in Harmony. She's just first grade this year.
Okay, excellent.
I'm Carrie. I have a daughter in first grade at Consolidated.
Teresa Ruth, and I have a granddaughter at Northside, and I work on the city council in Milton, so I heard a lot of different ideas back and forth regarding the referendum, and I wanted to make sure that I fully understand it.
Thanks for being here, all of you.
I'm Claire Gray. I have 3 children, 2 of whom are in the school district. I have one at Northside, one here at Harmony, and I have one coming into Harmony next year.
Yeah, well, thank you all for being here, and I want to take some time now to hear your thoughts or any questions that you have.
I have a couple questions. So, low revenue school district, is that by the state, like the revenue limit standards in terms of what you receive given revenue limits?
Back in the 1990s, the state kind of changed its system for funding schools, and they locked every district into what their spending was the year before. And they didn't tell districts that they were going to do that, and it created a real inequitable system. If districts were spending a lot prior to that, they got locked into a high level, and districts that were low spending got locked into a low level, and we're one of the, there's quite a few districts, but we're one of many that were locked into that low level. And then the only time that is able to increase is if the legislature increases that low revenue ceiling. And if you remember that one slide, it had that gray line kind of across the bottom. That's that low revenue ceiling for all districts right now. So the only way is either the legislature changing it or passing a local referendum. Did you have another?
How likely is it that the state legislature is going to change it or change some of their school support?
I'm going to talk a little bit about the history, and then because the history tells us the likelihood. I mean, we don't know what will happen in the future, but we make assumptions based on what we've seen in the past and what we hear people talking about. We know that with the current funding, which includes $325 per pupil that the state put in for this biennium, which is this year and next year, you saw in that state funding it went up a little bit more steeply at the far right of that because of that. And what we built into our assumptions is that that amount would continue. But even if that amount, with that amount continuing at $325, which is more than the state's history of spending for public schools, we still have that leads to that $5 million deficit that we see coming. But if we think of this as the $5 million deficit, if the state increases its funding and maybe shrinks that to $4 million, that would be ideal. If they shrunk this, because that's when I talked about the school board has the authority to levy that $5 million, but if the state kicks in more, then the board could make a decision to not levy that full $5 million, and they could do that every single year moving forward. So the ideal would be if the state improved their funding so that we didn't have to ask local taxpayers for that full $5 million.
So there's like some flexibility built into the recurring referendum in the sense that the school board could choose to levy or not levy that amount.
Yes, and our board has been pretty practical. When I talk about us being fiscally responsible, our board is, they're not spendthrifts, and I think if you asked our staff, 90% of them would say that Superintendent Dahman isn't very spendthrifty either. I've worked hard to, and all of our staff have worked hard to look for as many efficiencies as we can, and we've had to because of that lack of state funding. The downside of that is we don't really have any low-hanging fruit. If we have to make $5 million in cuts, they're going to be painful cuts because we don't have a choice. Other questions or thoughts, or are you hearing anything in the community about the referendum? Or Teresa, you had mentioned that there's been some discussion and you wanted to have some facts.
There's always some complaints and some concerns when there's a referendum and people are concerned that the district is just raising it just to raise it. And I think that these discussions are very beneficial to explain why and help people understand that it isn't something that is just to increase it so we can spend more, that there really is a purpose, and it is to understand the why and the how, and that the money will eventually go down over time, but to encourage people over and over again that there are ways to come in and understand it and have it explained, and that it's not just something to get angry about. So that was my goal, to come in and understand it.
Okay. Carrie, is Carrie here?
She's up.
Oh, Carrie has done a great job in putting together pieces of information, and they all include a QR code or a link to our website. And we have on our website it has the video that we showed, the slide presentations. It goes all the way back to this past summer when we had community focus groups as the board was making a decision about how to address this looming deficit. There were 40 to 45 community members that came in and studied the issue, and the board's recommendation to do this stemmed from that community group. And the other thing that's on the website are frequently asked questions. So if somebody wants to dive more deeply into any of these topics, like what's the difference between a recurring and a non-recurring referendum, or it gets at the why and it further explains the tax impact. So if you're having a conversation with someone and they're uncertain about something, I think referring them to the website, or always encourage them to reach out like you shared. They don't have to wait for one of these. I'd be happy to have conversations with small groups or with individuals to answer any questions that they have.
And that's what I think we do need to do, because in people's eyes, they see this number going up to them, And so their taxes are going up, and they just envision that people are spending more, and they can't, they can't understand the difference.
And I think a key point on that just came to the school board at the last school board meeting, and it's on one of the frequently asked questions now, is that belt tightening that we've been doing the last few years. And in that, the school board approves the number of staff that we have for all across our district every year. And over the last 3 years, we've reduced 19 positions over the last 3 years. And we've tied that to people retiring as much as we can so that we're not laying people off. But all of those have a significant impact on students. And that's where when I talked about we've made and those weren't easy reductions, and I don't want to refer to them that way, but we've put ourselves in the point that any other reductions that we have to do down the road are going to have significant impact on our students.
Can I piggyback off of that?
Yeah.
Like you said, people are just not as well knowledgeable about this, and then as life is right now, most people are just strapped and struggling, and inflation is not helping. And then this comes in, and people are asking for more money, and I think it just sets them on a panic, which I fully understand.
Oh, yes. Yes.
But I appreciate how you put it into a monthly position, and that was a lot easier for me to understand. And then another facet that I can see is I used to teach myself, and it wasn't too long ago that I quit for a number of reasons. But having personal experience in a classroom, I can tell you, those teachers, they do their darnest, and a lot of it comes out of pocket to help support these classrooms and these kids' individual needs, to help get through the year and do what those kids need, because that's what matters, is these kids. It was not Milton, by the way. I love Milton schools. I'm so much happier here. And these teachers, they spend that money out of pocket, and they do what they can for those kids, because that's our future. And these class sizes, as they are, of what you were saying, that's large. And to think of them going larger sets me on a panic. Thinking of putting myself in that classroom, having to teach more than that at one time, having to teach 25 at one time is a lot, but having to add more to that makes me fear for my daughter and her future. I do not want that for her. Just knowing the experiences, the different variety of needs in one single classroom, academic needs, behavioral needs, and only one adult in that classroom, that makes me want to homeschool my daughter, and I think she and I would kill each other, honestly, and I don't want to have to go that route. So that's really scary.
I appreciate your thoughts, and you're spot on everything that you said. Educating kids is harder now than it was, and I've been an educator all my life. I was a math teacher and then a middle school principal before I became a superintendent. But educating kids is harder now than it has ever been because of some societal things, the ability to be distracted by different things, and just the needs that students have. When you talked about being able to hire people and keep people and people leaving education, sometimes leaving for another school district, and we have to compete with school districts that have these resources. We lost our French program at the high school because Wanakee, who's right here, offered, and there's not very many French teachers around the state. It's hard to find a teacher, and it's hard to find a good one, and we had a great one. But Wanakee lost their French teacher, they retired, and they targeted ours and offered $7,000 more per year and a $7,000 signing bonus if they would come to their school. And we don't have the resources to compete with that. And our goal isn't to move us up here. Our goal is to get us in the middle and to keep us from falling there. What we try to do with salaries and benefits is be in the middle of the Badger Conference. We know that we don't have the resources to be the highest paying or have the best benefits, but we know the downside to being the lowest paying and having the worst benefits. So I appreciate your comments.
That's another thing too, is the salaries. I came from a district where they were trying very hard to get new teachers in because they were losing teachers. But then they were forgetting the teachers that they did have. And after 10 years in that district, I was making about what a brand new teacher would make. Yeah.
Yeah,
On top of
that makes it hard to stay
But
in.
yeah, it's important
the field.
to maintain those seasoned teachers who know the tricks of the trade, who know how to get kids from point A to point B, and not have a school full of brand new teachers.
Yeah. We have an amazing teaching staff. We have some phenomenal people at all of our schools, and we want to be able to keep them, and when they're ready, keep them until they retire. And then when they retire, we want to be able to hire somebody who's just as good as they were. Other thoughts or questions? Do you have anything? Any topics that you want to talk about or ask, questions to ask? Okay. Sarah, did you have anything else that?
No, I appreciate just your time. I know that most of you here are parents, and this is a commitment of you for you to come out and learn more. So I just appreciate you coming out. And I would encourage you to talk with your friends and neighbors, and encourage them to reach out to the district if they have questions. The district employees, we can't say to vote yes or no, but we can provide lots of information. And I have extra handouts that I can get if anybody wanted any of that, to be able to share that information and spread the word about the referendum.
And we know what I heard from some of you and what we've heard from other folks when we've shared this information is that now that we've heard about it, we understand why there's a need. And for some folks who maybe were not going to vote yes, that gets them to be thinking about it. And I'm going to look into some more information before I make my decision. And for some folks who are leaning to maybe vote yes, that once they hear the reason, it puts them in that camp. And we're working hard to get that information out, but we also know that we could hold 5 of these sessions every day between now and the election, and we wouldn't come close to the 10,000 to 11,000 eligible voters in our school district. So it is important that our parents and staff and community members are helping to spread the word, talking to your neighbors, talking to your friends. That's the small postcard-sized document is a good one. We've had a couple people who told me I take one of these or a couple of these with me when I go walks around my neighborhood, because people know I work for the school district. This is one of our staff members. People know I work for the school district, and they ask me about the referendum, and it gives me a chance to have a 2-minute conversation with somebody to help them better understand the issue and the situation. So any of these that you want to take, help yourselves to those.
I have some more questions. This is kind of based on your comments. What is an optimal class size?
I think it really depends, but I'd say that we typically would look for around 20 in kindergarten would be ideal, and then for first, second, and third, up to 22. Obviously, if we were around 20 for all of those grades, that would be amazing. Mm-hmm. But it's been a real long time since that might be a very rare occurrence. And then I think at the north side level, 24, 25 would be really ideal for 4th, 5th, and 6th graders. And their range is more like 26 to 29 right now, I think, at Northside, depending on the grade, and talking to the principal there. So we're already above in many of the schools and areas. And we have amazing teachers and support staff. We do have aides. I didn't want to give the impression we don't have. Our aides are invaluable. They're like our backbone in so many ways. They do so much. We just don't have like a designated aide for each teacher, but we have amazing aides supporting those rooms that are in and out of rooms every day, all day. We do the best we can, really.
And in those positions that Sarah was talking about, having somebody consistent in those positions is really important. Somebody who knows the school, knows the kids, and we're not just competing with these other school districts for people, we're competing with, when Quick Trip offers a higher wage for people, our school nutrition team members might say, oh, I can make more working at Quick Trip. And Quick Trip can increase their salary to be competitive by raising the price of milk, and we don't have the ability to raise our prices. The only thing that we can do to be able to stay competitive with other groups for any of our staff members is to come to the voters for additional revenue.
Tracy, to your point, how do you get the word out in Milton? I mean, is it going to council meetings? Is it writing to the Milton Courier? Is it going on Facebook? Like, how do you reach some of those people who don't need to hear it, but either can't get here or don't use might not use social media, or how do you talk to them, other than maybe talking to your neighbors and friends?
That's about it. We did have a discussion at our city council meeting, a presentation, but no, beyond that, we really can't discuss it at a city council meeting. But just what everyone else does, talk about it with their friends, and as much as possible, trying to encourage them to talk to other people too. You can't just start jumping down people's throats, but
I know there was a flyer, at least I received one in the mail. Did that go out to all district members?
Residents. Yes, and some people got it at the end of last week, some have gotten it over the last couple of days. The group that we worked with to get it out to everybody told us that everybody should have it by today. So if you haven't seen it yet, it should be in your mailbox today. And that's maybe the easiest way for us to get information out to everybody, but we also know that when people pick up their mail, there might be 4 or 5 flyers in it for other elections that are coming up. And some people don't take the time to read that, and I don't blame them. Sometimes my mail sometimes goes straight into the trash. We're going to do another mailer out to folks coming up, and that's our way to hit everyone. One of the other things that we learned, and you maybe heard that Janesville School District has two referendum questions this year. One is a $14.2 million operating referendum, and then about $150 million capital referendum to do upgrades on their facilities, on their buildings. And they sent out a mailer, and they sent it out to everyone that has a City of Janesville address. So if any of you, like folks that live around here that are in the City of Janesville, or even we heard some that live by Consolidated, got ours in the mail, and they also got the Janesville one in the mail, and I think that might confuse some folks because, and I've gotten questions from somebody that said, we could support your referendum, but we can't support both yours and Janesville, so I don't know if we're going to vote in favor of any. And I had to let them know that you're in one school district or the other, and you wouldn't have to pay both, but I can see why people would be confused by that because our school district comes into the City of Janesville, which is kind of unique.
I think another way to spread the word is to just go out to lots and lots of organizations and municipalities. I know I'll be going to the Town of Harmony meeting next Monday to speak. I know Rich has been at countless booster groups and parent group meetings and community organization meetings. If any of you are part of an organization that you feel would like to learn more about the referendum, I think that's another thing you could reach out about to let us know, like, I'm part of this group and I think it might be helpful for people to hear the message. Not that I want to volunteer Rich for more work. Did I just say that out loud? But I do think that word of mouth.
Free time every day.
Yeah, and I
try to get
I
a little
do
bit of
think,
sleep in, but it's
yeah, right.
I like getting out and talking to folks.
Yeah, and I think it matters. I think it's these kinds of conversations. Hopefully, each of you are taking home a piece of information that you didn't know before, or that you're processing in a different way than you were before, because of these rich conversations. And so, if you have ideas on that, I think that's helpful too.
And Sarah shared earlier that our school district staff, including Sarah and I and our school board members and everybody that works for the school district, aren't allowed, when they're on the clock, to advocate for the referendum. We're allowed to hold information sessions and send mailers that are informational, but we can't have anything that goes out or tell people that they should vote yes or vote no or support the referendum. There are outside groups that are able to do that, and there's a Vote Yes for Kids Facebook page that a community group has started up, and they're getting out information that way about how to get, I get questions sometimes about, does the district have any yard signs or things like that, and we have to tell them the district can't put out yard signs, but there's a group that is working on that.
And if you hear of staff or see people on Facebook promoting Vote Yes, after hours, that's totally okay to do that. But yeah, when you're on the clock, that's when you can't.
What other questions or thoughts do people have?
You used to be in Minnesota. Does Minnesota fund it similarly? I'm just wondering about, like, is this typical for all states?
Yeah, I moved here a little bit over 5 years ago. This is my 6th year here in Milton, and I lived in Minnesota my whole life before that. And the differences in school finance was the biggest difference that I had to learn when I moved from Minnesota. And teaching kids is the same, and a lot of the structure of the schools and the structure of school districts was the same. But there are a lot of differences in school finance. And Wisconsin and Minnesota used to be very similar in how well the states funded their schools. Wisconsin, not too long ago, was 11th in the country, the 11th highest state in the country for public school education funding, because there was a belief that strong schools build strong communities, and you can't have strong communities if you don't have strong schools. Minnesota has continued their higher than average support for public schools, and Wisconsin's has been on a steady decline for the last few years, to the point that we now are below 25th, so below the average state in funding for public schools. Anything else? If not, sometimes when you go home, you think, oh, I thought of a question on the way home, or you're having a conversation with someone and a topic comes up that we didn't talk about. Definitely feel free to reach out. We talked about the website before, but send me an email if you have questions, or send me an email and ask if there's a time that we could visit. If you want to visit with you or with a group of people, I'd be very, very happy to do that. There's about a month left before the election, and we want to make sure that people in our communities have accurate information so that they can make an informed vote, however they choose to vote.
Something to know, if you want to know if both referendums are down on a ballot, if you go to My Vote Wisconsin, you can click a ballot, and that will tell you basically what's on the ballot. So you shouldn't see both referendums on there. So if there are people who are confused, and you know, direct them there. I always find it helpful to know what's on my ballot, so I can look through.
And I was on the phone with that person that asked me, that was confused about both.
Right.
And I talked to them about their property tax bill statement, and it'll list what school district you're in on that statement too. It's another place.
So property tax bill, or My Vote Wisconsin free ballot. Okay.
One last thing as we're closing up that reinforces our school district being as fiscally responsible as we can. Our levy for this current year is a 2.5% decrease from last year's levy, because we've been tightening our belts to get in front of the approaching fiscal cliff as much as we can.
So then does the school board look at levies every year as they're setting budget?
Yeah.
So that's part of how the school board works. So this is an annual review of school levies. So it will be reviewed on an annual basis by the school board.
Yes, they make a decision every
Okay.
November on what the levy is going to be for that year.
For the upcoming school
For the
year.
upcoming school year. I appreciate appreciate everybody's time. Thank you all very much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's good to see you all.
Now the sun's down, we'll see how cold it feels when we go outside.
Mornings and evenings are.
We saw wear coats this morning, we saw t-shirt and sleeves, like we saw everything. Like fall and spring are always.
Definitely don't need that.
I apologize